Okay, I'm going to start the webinar and people will start coming in.
You want? Good. Doing well?
Okay, welcome everybody. As the attendees start to show up, we're going to do introductions and then get kicked off on our presentation, which will be the second public presentation and listening session for the East Main Park design. So we'll just give it just a few more minutes. I keep seeing that number grow. When I see it top off, as far as participants go, we'll get started. Okay, and as I said that, I think we have actually. So at 6:02, we're scheduled to start at 6 p.m. My name is Michael Black. I'm the Director of Ashland Parks and Recreation, and I'm really excited to be here tonight with everybody to go over the East Main Park design. Tonight is a significant benchmark meeting because we're going to be talking about a preliminary plan that we come up with our consultants. And before we get into this, I want to do some introductions. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who came from the public. We truly appreciate the support for this park. We've had a lot of people participate up to date, and we're looking forward to more participation as we go forward. And we are able to look at the preliminary plans and get feedback from you. I think the key to making a true great public place is to get the public involved and to hear what they think needs to go into it, and to get their feedback and to listen to them and hopefully engage them throughout the entire process. So as far as introductions go, I want to welcome the commissioners first. We have two commissioners on screen here, Jim Lewis and Rick Launt. Rick Launt is the chair of the Ashland Parks and Recreation Commission, elected to fill that seat. And Jim Lewis is the vice chair, also elected through by the citizens of Ashland. We have Leslie Eldridge, who may join us a little bit later, who is also a commissioner, and Julian Bell, who also participated on this plan. We have a committee that's been put together for reviewing this plan and helping staff and trying to get feedback on and just a smaller focus group. The committee members who are present tonight are Rick Launt. Hopefully Julian Bell will join us in a little bit, Commissioner Bell. Casey Botts from RVMBA is here tonight. Judy Butler, a neighborhood HOA president, representing the HOA in the neighborhood around the park. And Kaylee Cottle, I don't see her here tonight, but Kaylee is in the Public Works Department with the City of Ashland and has been helping us out throughout the process. Rachel Dials and Tara Keywell from Ashland Parks and Recreation are here tonight as well. Tara's been instrumental in putting together these meetings. I'm also with Ashland Parks and Recreation, as I mentioned earlier. And then we have our consultants who will do most of the presentation tonight. And we have Piper Von Chaumier and Aaron Gambacorda from Terrain Landscape Architecture. And we'll hear from them a little bit later, and Piper will go into a little bit more detail on their background and do another little introduction when we get to their part. Commissioner Launt?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. You talked about how important it is to have public input. And I just want to point out that the plan that we're going to see tonight was really spawned at a public meeting where staff kind of facilitated and helped 40 or 50 public members of the community put things on a map. And if you go back to that, and I think you're going to show that later, it looks rather similar to what we ended up with. So I want to point out that this process was actually spawned by public input.
I agree, and we will show the results from that first meeting in one of my slides in just a couple minutes here. So one other thing I want to talk about, and I'll bring it up in a minute as well, but we are going to have public input at this meeting. Obviously, we're talking about getting the public's involvement, and the way that we have done public input at these meetings in the past, and the way we'll do it tonight, is through the chat feature. There is a chat feature that should be enabled, and the participants should be able to use the chat feature. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions, though, until we get through the presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity to populate those chats. And as people populate chats, we'll be able to read those and we'll respond to those in real time. It seemed to work out pretty well last time with the webinar feature. I think it's the best way that we can do that. And with 81 participants here tonight, we could have a lot of feedback. So we will get into this presentation right away so we can try to keep to our schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the presentation, and we'll see all of our participants in a little bit. All right. So those who are not presenting, if you could turn your camera off, that would be helpful. Okay, thank you. All right, so can you see my screen? Rick, you're the only person I can see, so somebody give me a thumbs up.
We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So like I said, we're going to go through we did the welcome and introductions. Terrain landscape architecture will be presenting a draft tonight. This draft is more detailed than we've seen in the past, so that'll be exciting. We'll be able to see the shape of the park, all the different features. You'll be able to get a feel for the park and what it's going to look like, and the overall design theme, if you will, for the park. The biggest part of the meeting, I'm sure, will be the question and answers, which will be the third part, and we will do that through the chat feature. And then to tie it all up, we will talk about the next steps at the end, and we'll summarize what we talked about here tonight. Now, there will be more options for community feedback. The meeting tonight is to get feedback to help guide the design. We're showing you a preliminary plan here tonight. And that preliminary plan, we'd like to get feedback on it because it is preliminary. And as we go forward, if there are changes that we hear in concert, if people are talking in concert and we're getting a lot of information that makes a lot of sense, we want to look at that with our committee and potentially look at some changes that could be made to the park as we go forward before we come up with a final plan. Now, we will be presenting to the Parks Commissioners. I believe that will be the second Wednesday in April that the Parks Commissioners will have a meeting at 6 p.m. to discuss this topic and to get a presentation on the preliminary plan. So how did we get to this point where we are now? I'm going to go over the YMCA park here in just a minute, but what we're talking about is a 6.5 acre area that will replace the former YMCA park. And I'll show you in a minute a map that shows the YMCA park, but the YMCA park generally was in this vicinity, and it was something that was technically a public park, although it was generally and mostly, predominantly, I would say, used by the YMCA. It was Ashland Parks and Recreation, public funds that went into maintaining it and building it before we maintained it. And over time, we just didn't see a lot of use from the public. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the YMCA was using it for all of their programs. And they were certainly entitled to do that. And I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but it just seemed like we might want to look at getting a park that had less restrictions and third-party users, and get something that was predominantly public as opposed to predominantly used by the YMCA for their programs. So we went through a process that I'll talk about in a minute, and we ended up purchasing these 6.5 acres here. Over the time that we've been talking about this park, from the time we purchased the first 5.5 acres to the expansion 1 acre, which you can see here in yellow, we've had a lot of support from the public, from the neighborhood, and from people in general, just throughout the community, who want to see a park developed in this area. Now, some of those people live in the area and they want to see a neighborhood park that they can walk to. Some of the people we've received a lot of support from are involved with mountain biking and want to see a pump track in this area and a skills park. We have people who are very interested in a dog park in this area and have been for a very long time. I was thinking about this morning, and I've been with Ashland Parks and Recreation almost 8 years. And when I came on board, one of the things that I was tasked with was to continue to work on developing a park on this end of town that had a dog park. So these things take a long period of time, and we did change gears a couple of times on the dog park, but we're at a point now where we're looking at moving forward, and a lot of people have shown a lot of support for a dog park in this area. Other things that we'll talk about tonight, you'll see have wide community support, like community gardens and walking paths, playgrounds, things like that. We also are lucky enough to be able to choose a park space that already has good connections to the neighborhoods through vehicular access, but also, and more importantly, in my opinion, pedestrian access and bicycle access. You can see here on the right of your screen the existing public pedestrian path that's in between the houses there, which is actually something that was developed and required of the city. That's a walking path that's right of way that goes from the street to the property behind, which will eventually be a park. So we're really excited to take advantage of that and to take advantage of the other connections that exist for this neighborhood park. So I'm going to jump through this really quick. Like I said, it's about the same size as the former YMCA park, but we're looking at developing it differently so that the maintenance would actually be less than the 6.5 acres of the YMCA park. We are looking at a quarter-mile radius within the community where we're trying to get parks generally within a quarter-mile radius of all the residents within the community. And surprise, we're just about there where we've been able to accomplish that. And this park here pretty much ties it up for most of the areas in the city. And there's some very distinct areas where there's exceptions, but generally speaking, Ashland has a park or an open space within a quarter mile of all the residents that you can walk to and take advantage of. That has been built by Ashland Parks and Recreation, or obtained by Ashland Parks and Recreation over time. And I think that's a great community benefit that the citizens of Ashland enjoy and will continue to enjoy with this park. The funds are available for this park, and I want to talk about where those funds came from. So the yellow and orange that you can see here at the top, that's the 6.5 acres, and that's East Main Park. So on the top is East Main, just below and to the side, we've got the neighborhoods here with Brooks Lane. We've got Clay Street just to the west here. And we've got a lot of density around here that's already built up with some areas that potentially would densify in the future. Now, the YMCA park here is 6.5 acres, as I stated, with a parking lot, a bathroom, and soccer fields, and a playground. Now, that was sold to the YMCA for the cost of the improvements on site for $480,000 in July of 2017. And the money from that sale went into an account to replace that park in this neighborhood. Now, okay, there we go. So we also sold the red parcel here to the Housing Authority of Jackson County for just over $1 million, and that was at market value, and that's about what we paid for it when we purchased it from the city of Ashland. And that went directly to the Housing Authority so that they could build affordable housing or expand affordable housing in the area, which they have done. And we also sold the small blue portion there, which is a long story, but it's related to the tree, which is just right off of Clay Street, and allowed the city to be able to protect that tree by selling them a little bit of property so they had more buffer, so they didn't have to look at that tree for development area. And you put all of that together with the food and beverage funds that were dedicated already for a new dog park, and SDC funds, which stands for System Development Charges, which is money that is paid by people who are building new houses as they come into town. They're kind of paying impact fees or buying into the system that already exists. And so you put all of that together and it's about just under $2 million. And so that's where the money is coming from to develop this park. So when I say on the previous slide that the money already is there, these funds are in an account and are ready to be used for this park to replace the YMCA park. Now, what's it going to cost to build the park? Well, we had to purchase the land first, so it's about $1 million to purchase it. We were, for the 5.5 acres, we were able to negotiate with the owners and get it at a reduced price. We were also able to purchase 1 acre to add to that at $100,000, which is also below market value and could be considered a donation by the owners, the former owners, so that we could add that as a park. We also have current expense of design for the park. And if you add all that up, we're about $1.2 million, which leaves about $740,000 that can go to the development of this park. Now, there are several methods or several parts to this park and methods that will be used to get to the point where we can build out the entire park. We are still looking for grants. I'm actively working with the RVMBA and looking at grants that could be used for the pump track and the skills park. But we do have the money to move forward and to at least get started on this park. We may have to phase the park. And I think that has been something that we have stated all along, that depending on the cost or the expense of development, this park could be phased over time. Now, to give you an idea of priorities, this has been a priority of the Parks Commissioners for a long period of time, longer than I have been here. But just recently, the Parks Commissioners adopted it again as one of their top 5 goals. It comes in at number 4, which is to build the East Main Neighborhood Park, including the dog park, bike skills park, and pump track. So Commissioner Lant had mentioned that there has been community input from the beginning on this. This is an example of every picture that you see here is a different plan that was put together by a table of citizens who came to a meeting way back in October of 2019 in person. We met at the high school and spent a couple hours together talking and then working on coming up with some designs for a park based on what the members who showed up would like to see. We got a lot of notes from this park. This is called a charrette process. We did a very quick charrette, but we did do a charrette, and we were able to get information from the public and give them the opportunity to design this park as they would like to see it. So you may just see shapes and things like that here, but what we got from this is we got ideas. We got ideas based on what people wanted to see, what their priorities are, where they would put things on the site, and what those things were. So from there, we were able to start a conceptual plan, and then that brings us to where we are now. So I am going to turn it over to Piper and team at this point, and I will stop sharing. Looks like I did stop sharing. Piper, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and these are our consultants who will take us to the next portion, which will reveal the preliminary plan.
Okay, give us 1 second, just a moment, so we can start our presentation. Sorry.
Okay, and I'm just going to do a little bit more housekeeping really quick. So those of you who joined us late, we will be having a question and answer section that will come up after Piper and Aaron do their presentation. And we will do that through the chat feature. And we're asking people to hold on their questions until we do get through the presentation, and we'll announce when that starts. And we'll try to work through everybody's questions. So it's all yours, Piper.
Thank you. Just a minute. All right, can everyone see a white screen that says train at the top?
Yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Michael, and for the introduction and for going through the history and the process that really started, like you said, back in 2019, and you know how the park and how the lands have become part of the park system. We're really excited to be here to show you kind of this next step of the design that we've been working so closely with the working group to develop, and you know, have gotten some great feedback from the community. So we're excited to share the plan. So I'm a principal at Terrain Landscape Architecture. I moved here about 6 years ago from Portland with the family because we just loved coming to Ashland. We loved Lithia Park. We loved the trails, and we have 2 young children, so they are able to grow up and enjoy the park system and the city of Ashland. And so far, it's been such a wonderful experience for our entire family. We started Terrain Landscape Architecture about 2.5 years ago with the idea of connecting people and communities through the regenerative power of landscapes. And I will tell you that this park, the design process for this park really has solidified our mission statement. You know, reaching out to the communities and then taking a look at the landscapes that we're creating with this regenerative lens, especially in the current environmental situation that we're at.
Hi, I'm Erin Gambacorda. I'm originally from the Midwest, but I've been on the West Coast for about 16 years now between California and Oregon, and also just kind of fell in love with the West Coast landscapes, and my whole family also loves parks and getting outdoors. So thrilled to be involved as a designer on this park.
We've broken this this design process into 3 groups, really. We're at the tail end of the discovery, which is the top part. There's also refinement and implementation. So after we get some feedback from you all from this meeting, we will go into the refinement. But first, with the discovery, is the site analysis. Pretty obvious, maybe, you know, going to the site, checking it out, looking at the constraints and the opportunities, the sun, the soil, the existing vegetation, the noise, all of those things that we're gathering from the site, you know, and looking at the boundaries and the areas that are adjacent to the site. In addition to this discovery moment, we have a traffic analysis, and we've hired a traffic engineer to really study the traffic that's in the immediate area, but also to manually count other similar used areas. So for example, she manually counted how many people came in and out of the dog park on the north side of town, or other bike parks, or other community parks, or other neighborhood parks. She gathered all sorts of wonderful data to create what's called a traffic impact analysis that will be shared with you once it's finalized. Then there's the community outreach part, which actually goes through all 3: discovery, refinement, and implementation. But it's really important during this time because we were trying to figure out who's going to be using it, how people are going to be using it, how they're going to get there, what they want to do when they're there, how long they'll be there. In addition, you know, we've been working, as Michael said, with the working group, which consisted of some of the people that you met at the beginning of this meeting, for feedback, to bounce ideas off of, to present ideas, and for them to come back with great feedback. We also, I think it was in September of last year, there was a survey monkey that went out. I think there were over 1,000 people that responded, which is fantastic. And it really just gathered information on the demographics, the time that this park might be used, some of the things that people like about parks, don't like about parks. It had all sorts of questions focused on this park and how people might be using it. So then there's the program development. And as you saw in the diagrams from that 2019 community meeting, there's all sorts of programs, right? There's the community garden, there's a bike park, there's a dog park. And we kind of studied how all of those things can be integrated onto one site. So It's a little bit of site analysis combined with looking at the different programs and how they can be combined effectively on one site. As I mentioned back in September, there was a public survey that was sent out, a survey monkey that was sent out to everybody. And I think we got quite a lot of great feedback. The public was invited to provide demographic information, rank their interests in a large list of park activities, structures, and answer open-ended questions regarding 3 key areas: dog parks, pump tracks, and community gardens.
So like Piper said, the response was great. And again, this is part of the whole key participation in this process of designing the park to be what the community wants it to be. So it's really exciting to see so much response. Where they live, 90% of the people who responded live in Ashland. So maybe not too surprising, but that's great that the local community is getting really involved. 72% of those people live within 2 miles of the park. So Michael already talked about how many parks there are in Ashland and getting that 1/4 mile radius. So we're excited to see so many people within a couple miles getting involved. Transportation, this is just about how people are going to get to the park. So almost half are going to drive, but then the other half are going to either bike or walk. And a couple of people had other answers like motorcycle, wheelchair, or eventually maybe take the bus when the route reaches it. Who responded? So, you know, it's just kind of interesting to look at the demographics of the community and who's going to use the park, and that helps us with the design as well, and who we're designing for. So 31% are in the 35 to 44 age group. 22% are in the 45 to 54-year-old age group. And 20.9 are above 65. More than half have children under 18. And most of those have 1 or 2 children. And 82% of the children are ages 6 to 12. Just some interesting statistics. And if you took the survey, you already saw all of these, but you know, we asked things like, what do the kids like to do? And a lot of kids play outside in nearby parks or play sports or play outside in their neighborhood after school right now. So having a park for them to continue doing those things is a great thing. 60% have dogs. So that's another, you know, just supports what you've already seen about that demand for a dog park. Which 5 activities are the most important for the East Main Street Park to have? The pump track, walking paths, pollinator plants, picnic areas, and a playground for ages 6 and up. Then you can see the other things ranked below that. Dog parks. So we started to get into what types of amenities people want to see and get a little more specific. So the top responses for things that people want to see in a dog park at East Main Street are shade trees, a large turf area, or some space to play ball, a walking loop, and benches. And then we get more into the open-ended questions where people could type in a response of their experience, things that they like about existing dog parks that they go to, and things that they dislike about existing dog parks that they go to. So things that people liked, just again, 1,000 people responded. So there were more responses than what we're showing here, but these are just some that cropped up over and over and were notable. So fenced enclosure, double gated entry, shade trees, shelters, and seating, large open space and nice grass, running water, creek, or pool, a small dog area or a separation of areas for dogs of different sizes, agility training or enrichment and structures for the dogs, trails to walk on, poop bags, scoops, and trash cans, hose, spray pad for rinse off. Those are things people liked. things that people disliked about the existing parks they visited included aggressive dogs, dog fights, and owner altercations, mud or lack of green space, dog poop, mess, smell, and germs, hot and windy conditions or too dusty and dry, a lack of shade, a lack of a visual block from the traffic areas, and just a boring dog park or a lack of interesting features. For the pump track, more than half of people said that they felt like they would benefit from the pump track. And it's not all for kids, it's for a range of ages. So, so that's another interesting statistic for us to consider for the design of the pump track. And what types of amenities would people like at the pump track or skills course at East Main Street Park? That includes a paved track, wood bridges, dirt jumps, boulders, skinnies, berms, rollers. Again, areas for all ages and abilities, year-round use, lighting, seating, a staging area for people getting ready to use, bike maintenance and a repair station, separation from the dog park, and water and shade. People wrote in some responses for things they liked about pump tracks that they've used and didn't like about pump tracks that they've used. So things people liked included just the quality of the build, having multiple tracks or options for different skill levels, having several drop-in points, banked turns, easy jumps, tools, air, repair stands for bikes, seating, water and shade, skills and survey signage. And things that people disliked about pump tracks that they visited included it being crowded, loud or noisy, trash, weeds, or a lack of maintenance, it being too small or not large enough for adult bikes, poor vision or lack of flow, not enough levels or variety, and being hard to get started or a lack of waiting space.
Community gardens were also part of the survey. I was the secretary of the Friends of Community Gardens in Portland, Oregon for a while. And so I think some of these survey results were particularly interesting. 24% might use the community garden of those people that were surveyed, 75% not likely. And the amenities that they wanted to see in the community garden is, of course, a deer fence or dog fence. As we all know, the deer can be an issue with gardens. Easy access from the vehicular parking area, restrooms, tool storage, shed, greenhouse, drip irrigations or faucets at each bed, composting, fruit trees, beehive, pollinator friendly, and shade and seating area in the community garden. Amenities that they liked, some of the things that stood out were the tools available, the shed again, raised beds or a variety of plot sizes, so they're not all 4x8 or a standard size. Most gardeners like to have a clean, organized area, so generally clean and organized. Required hours for maintaining common areas, locked gates, and educational opportunities, things that they disliked. Locked gates, so that repeated from the liked side over there. Trash, messy gardens, lack of irrigation, water shortages, which we will be considering for the entire design of this park. Areas that are too hot, narrow beds, rodent problems, waiting lists. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I do understand that there's quite a waiting list for people to have a plot in a community garden in the city of Ashland. So the transportation, this really backed up what the transportation engineer also discovered. 49% will be driving to the park, so 49% of the people surveyed, and the other half, more or less, will be walking or biking. As Aaron mentioned, 72% will travel less than 2 miles, with the rest of them traveling over 2 miles to get to the park. That's kind of the conclusion of the survey results. Next, we'll go on to our design and some of the approaches before we actually show the plan. and I showed this plan at our last public listening session. I just wanted to bring it up again. This ecosystem approach. And we're really trying to take a look at the site, going back to that site analysis, seeing what's going to fit best, what's going to be really low maintenance. That's very important to us and to everyone that we've been working with, including pollinator plants, vegetated buffers, particularly along the east and west where the neighbors are. The site is fairly flat, so we plan to have minimal grading. So we're not going to be building lots of walls or creating lots of grade changes or moving a lot of soil. The plant selection will be used, we'll be using a lens of, that's native compatible, very drought tolerant, water wise. And then the stormwater solutions. The idea is to collect as much of the water on site and treat it before it goes downstream. So we'll be using things like swales in the parking lots, impermeable pavers, some detention areas for the water to clean itself before it moves on.
Another part of the approach, in addition to thinking about the environment and the ecosystem, is thinking about the users and the community when we think about how we're putting these pieces together, kind of to puzzle out how to design this park. So we're thinking about universal design, which is a design approach that results in places that can be used and enjoyed by everyone. So in terms of this park, that means getting people to the park by accommodating different modes of transportation, adding sidewalk connections to the neighborhood, talking to RVTD about a bus shelter for future transit, and providing that on-site vehicle and bicycle parking, and the connections to the neighborhood for pedestrians as well. So then once you get people to the park, we want to design everything that's in the park with considerations for accessibility, and that impacts the design and the materials choices that are made. It impacts things like seating and drinking fountains and restrooms. We want everyone to be able to access and use. In addition to materials and furnishings, that also means variety in just the types of spaces and activities that are available to reach the most people of different ages and abilities. So as we start to look at the plans, you'll see not just the playground and bike and dog specific uses, but also plenty of open space and what we would call kind of unprogrammed space for bird watching and hiking and benches to stop along the way and rest if you need to, or just enjoy the park.
Great. This next slide, something if you were at the last public listening meeting, you would have seen. So this is, the first pass diagram we collected the imagery that Michael showed at the beginning of this slideshow with the sticky notes, on the plan, on the aerial photo of how each of these certain programmed elements might fit on the site. So this was our first pass diagram and organizing some of these a little bit and really kind of looking at the connections and how things would flow in and out. And again, it's very similar to, as Commissioner Lant mentioned, the original 2019 diagram where there's the pump track on the left-hand side. On the bottom left, there's the community garden with a little parking area. There's also quite a lot of area for walking paths and some picnic areas and more of like a natural meadow area. Dog park for both large and small dogs, and then the central play area. All of these are, developed, and we're still working on fleshing out, exactly what all of these little areas mean. Then there's also the addition, of course, of the parking area, and we'd like to utilize that parking area as a feature, really, so that we can, like I mentioned before, collect the water, along the edges, use it as an educational opportunity for water treatment and for stormwater before it goes downstream. As I mentioned, we hired a traffic engineer, and she did some manual counts at various places like the dog park on the north side, also estimates that she gathered from other facilities that are similar to what's planned for this park. And per her calculations, as you can see in the diagram, off of East Main, she's thinking about 12 trips a day for bicycle and pedestrians off of that central access point off of East Main, with 30 trips by cars. So that's 70% of the total vehicles that will be coming to the site will be entering and exiting off of East Main. Down on the southern side along Abbott, it's kind of the flip-flop where there's a lot less cars. 30% of the vehicles, or 13 trips a day, will be coming in and out from that southern access, with almost or more than double pedestrian and bike traffic from that point. And then as Michael mentioned, on the east side of the site off of Brooks Avenue, there's a pedestrian access. So a few trips, 6 trips a day, more or less. It's mostly neighborhood access for bicycle and pedestrians. Oh, and as Aaron mentioned, up at the northeast corner, there is a bus stop that's a future bus stop that's planned. That's a part of the RVTD master plan. Her conclusions were that street capacity is sufficient to support development. There's adequate connections that exist for all travel modes, or they will be provided. Safety, like site distance, crash history in the direct vicinity, and access has been evaluated and no concerns were identified. So going back to the original 5 elements of the design, the program elements, the dog park, the pump track, the community garden, the open space natural area, and the central play area. And we started to put all of these on a plan and dig into them a little bit and ask each other what else could go in there. So we'd like to debut our plan, which we're very excited about. And again, as Commissioner Lunt said, mentioned earlier, it's very similar to those original sticky notes on a plan. At the top side, you have the pump track. To the left of that is the community garden with a small parking lot that's directly adjacent to that community garden. To the east of that, or on the bottom side of the plan, is the open space area, which is really intended to be more of a meadow space, very naturalized, with some gravel walking paths around that area. To the right of that is the dog park with a separate area for large dogs, for small dogs, with a shade structure. And then of course the central parking area with access off of East Main. And right in the center, the heart of the park, is the play area. And that's something that's going to be developed just like all the areas, but probably more natural, nature-based play. A small lawn for kicking the ball, throwing the frisbee, picnicking, that sort of a thing, and then a multi-use court, which we're looking forward to developing with the community.
This is a black and white version of that plan. So you can start to see some of the level of detail that we've gone to so far. And again, this is all preliminary, and we're looking forward to your feedback on what we've incorporated so far. But you can start to see some of the elements, like these are restrooms just off of the parking area. This is a pavilion, a sheltered area with picnic tables so people can gather and have birthday parties or just get out of the sun or the rain. This is that central area. This is the dog park, the pump track and skills course, the community garden, which is a big blank slate for the community, except for some fencing and shed and an area and access for providing those compost and garden materials. And this is the open space and meadow. So we have a few images. You'll see some more as we go through the plans. And these are kind of meant to show and inspire the types of things that might happen here in this park, and the types of things that we're thinking could be incorporated. So shelters, you know, of some type for sun and rain. This is an RVTD bus shelter, which again is a future improvement that's planned along East Main. The idea of having some solar power on those shelters to help power lighting or other similar features, incorporating restrooms with a shelter and lighting, of course.
So we're going to blow up each of these areas with some imagery and with some further explanation. We'll start off with the community garden. And as Erin mentioned, it's kind of a blank slate. We have the perimeter deer fence, of course, a shed, and a shade structure adjacent to that shed so that the gardeners can get out of the sun or the rain. There's an area for compost so that there's easy access right off of the parking area to bring in supplies, bring in compost and amendments and things like that. We've gathered a whole bunch of fun imagery, I think, about each one of these areas. And we're really looking forward to working with the community to further design all of these areas, in particular, you know, this community garden. We want to understand, you know, does it want to be a food forest, all raised beds? Does there want to be, you know, mason bee shelters, accessibility? We're going to be looking, you know, and working with the community to provide some areas that are, you know, specific for those people that need accessible beds that are raised so that you can access them with a wheelchair. And really, you know, who's going to be here, how are they going to use it, and what are they going to be growing? This is the central play area. And as Piper said, it includes a lawn area and a multi-sport court. And then these play elements. This path that you can see going around is intended to be kind of a tricycle path for smaller kids on bikes and scooters who may not be using the pump track just yet, or just want to go in circles while they're in this area. So the play elements are mostly nature-based. We're hoping to use a lot of natural materials and kind of open-ended opportunities for kids to climb and play and have a good time. The lawn is included to give people that small area to have a picnic or to have a Tai Chi class or that type of group activity. Yeah, that's the play area. I'll go back to the play area really quick. One thing, you know, as with the entire site and the design, you know, we really want your feedback, but the sports court is something that, you know, in particular, we'd love to have some feedback on. You know, what are your preferences for how that space might be used? And what are your thoughts, you know, as far as size and types of activity? So any feedback on that would be really great. So this is the pump track, which isn't designed. This is a placeholder. Our next phase of design is we've hired a consultant, Bello Solutions, who they design and build amazing pump tracks and skills park, you know, bike skills parks, and they're top-notch pros on understanding how, you know, users from the beginners to the advanced are going to be using this this pump track and designing it so that it can be used for and enjoyed by everybody. We did work with them a bit on the size so that we could, you know, our placeholder on this plan is the appropriate size. And our next phase, we're going to be working with the community and specifically community groups like the mountain bikers so that we can get the, the bike community and Velo Solutions together to work out the specifics of how this is used and the design and the end user and the small child that's just learning versus, someone that's wanting something that's a little bit more challenging. I also see this as being very community driven, even some of the future construction of it, especially the skills park, which is not asphalt, it's dirt. And this is where the bridges would happen and people would be constructing, fun little jumps and things like that. So this, similarly to the community garden, is going to be a big community design push. Oh, one thing I forgot to add. We do have a shade area on the south, I guess it's the east side, it's the lower side, so that people could gather. If there's a class with a few children to learn how to do this pump track, they can gather there. There could be a place where someone could pump up tires or, kind of tinker with their bike under a shaded structure. Or if mom's there and she's watching her children, she can be under the shelter and gather with, other moms and let the children ride on the bike path.
Right. This is the dog park. So the dog park also has a shade structure. We're really, that's something that kept coming up in the survey. That the park needs to have some shade. So we've got some shade trees. But we also have a structure in this area that'll have some benches under it, places that people can sit down and watch their dogs, or maybe even throw a ball from under the shade structure if it's too hot to be out. We've incorporated a lot of those amenities and enrichment type structures to that we're really hoping that people will enjoy. And just to back up a little bit, this is the small dog area and the big, larger dog area. So we've got it separated with a fence through the middle. So they'll have their separate gated entrances. And on each side, they'll have things to do and some basic park amenities like benches, drinking fountains with the dog bowl.
Agility stuff.
Yeah, agility, like the photos that you see down at the bottom that are a lot of fun for the dogs and good training opportunities.
And one of the things that came up in our last working group, which I thought was a great idea by Commissioner Rick, one of them, sorry, yeah, I think it was Rick, was on the north side where you see this area, and it's in this illustrative, it's purple, but and we'll get into the stormwater a little bit on a later slide. But there was in the previous community survey, there was some idea that there would some requests for some wet areas for dogs to get into. And so if some of the stormwater from the site could be directed to this corner, then, during certain times of the year, it could be a little bit more wet so that the dogs could get in and get muddy or, be in the water. So I thought that was a pretty fun use of the stormwater facility and tying it into the dog park. Hal's not included. So planting is something that we're going to really get into in this next phase. We're planning to use less water. This is going to be not a traditional park. So the plan is to use a lot less water than a traditional park would use. There's the area that's on the east side in that 1 acre parcel that was added on. That's, primarily a meadow area. And the idea would be that, we would water it very infrequently, if at all, if necessary. And hopefully the goal is that we would water plants to establishment. And then if they didn't get any water during some of the years like we've been having, then they would still survive. So this is quite, a lot of research is going to go into the planting so that we can really provide some planting areas that are pollinator friendly, drought tolerant, and can be enjoyed by the community as well. And this is a perfect spot for some people to provide some input, because there's a lot of great experts in our community that know a lot about xeriscaping, pollinator plants, native plants. We've got some great feedback too about trees that should and shouldn't be in the dog park, for example, that we just didn't even think of. So the more information we have, and particularly about these plants, the better. These diagrams are a little bit small. Sorry about that. But we just took a diagrammatic approach, kind of a lens, just to show some of our stormwater management strategies on the left-hand side, and then the water use maintenance levels on the right-hand side.
Wow. So like Piper was just saying with the planting, a key part of the stormwater management is going to be incorporating some bioswales and rain gardens and places that we can use planting to treat the stormwater, get as much of it to absorb into the site as possible. And then if it's passed on, further down the system, it's been treated as well. So you can see, the different colors here. Just because it's small, I can tell you that the bright blue are the bioswales. Sort of here, we've concentrated them mostly around the main parking space and along the paving along East Main. And there's a smaller parking area for community garden members to drop off supplies and things. So that's also going to have another bioswale near there. This color is the rain garden. So those are kind of slightly larger areas where we're going to direct the stormwater as well. And then this purple in the parking areas is where we see an opportunity for permeable paving. At the community garden parking lot, it's going to possibly be gravel to keep that water infiltration higher. Oh, sorry. And then the main parking lot is some kind of permeable paver that's most likely not gravel, but allows the water to filter through the paving and slows it down that way.
And one thing that's not on this diagram are the walking paths would also be gravel. On top of just all the planting, they'll any of the meadow area and the planted area, of course, are permeable as well. On the right-hand side, my apologies that it's pretty small. This is the water use maintenance level diagram, and I kind of see a lot of this going hand in hand. High water use being higher maintenance, lower water use, no water use being no maintenance. And the two areas, well, I'll start at the top. The yellow is no water. The pump track is a turf and asphalt product, so no water is necessary for that. There's also turf, artificial turf, I should clarify, in that central play areas for the nature playground area. And then there's some other kind of perimeter areas where no water is necessary. The next level is this low water. So it goes, yellow is no water, low water is the light yellow. The medium green is low, maybe medium. And then the more Kelly green or grass green is a little bit higher water. And so that light green are areas that have very little water use. During hot summer months, it might need water every once in a while, but it's not something that's going to be needed weekly or certainly not daily. And then the idea would be that a lot of these areas wouldn't need water after the plants are established. That medium area, or the medium green, pardon, These are areas that are focused around where the people will be, where the gathering spaces are, along some of the paths. It's where the pollinator plants can go. It's a little bit more ornamental, but really still focusing on very drought tolerant planting types. And with the idea that these could also be established and wouldn't need water in the event that we had a low water year. And then to the green, the Kelly green, the grass green, we do have a small patch of grass right in the center that would need, regular water. We are doing research, just like with all the other plants, to find a seed mix that's going to be as low as possible, but still provide, a nice green place to picnic or, do a yoga class in. And then, of course, the community garden during certain months, we'll be watering their vegetables, their fruits, their herbs. So that will need a little bit more water than the rest of the park. So next steps, after this meeting and after the input that we gather, we'll be finalizing these schematic design plans. Then we'll take these schematic design plans and we'll take it to our bike consultant, as I mentioned earlier, Velo Solutions, so that they can start work on the pump track design. We also have a civil engineer that will start designing the parking areas and the right-of-ways. And then we dig into the design development of all the park elements, and we do this with user groups, with a community garden group, with RVMBA, with B City. Hopefully there's a sports court group, ASAC, and the adjacent neighborhood associations. With that, we'll turn it over to Michael.
Okay. Aaron and Piper, thank you so much for the presentation. I am very excited. I hope everybody else is, to finally see these preliminary plans. I want to just really quick touch on a couple of things, and Piper and Aaron, I think, mentioned everything, but I just want to touch on a couple of key points and make sure that they get a little bit of extra attention. And I'd call these themes for this park. One of them is pollinator gardens, and Piper mentioned those just a minute ago. And we are a B City USA, and Ashland Parks and Recreation hosts the B City subcommittee, B City USA subcommittee meeting. Sorry about that. And we're serious about pollinators. And so there are a lot of spaces in here that we will be working with the pollinators within the community to help keep them going. This is a maintenance-minded plan. If you were paying attention to the water portion and how drainage works, you could see that there's only one area in here that's like the traditional lawn. And so we're working really hard to come up with plans here, and with our consultants, they've done a great job to be water minded and conservation minded and stormwater minded, with stormwater management in mind, where we can control stormwater on site and capture that and reuse it if possible. But if we do have to release it into the system, we've already cleaned it. Walking is a huge part of universal design, and I want to touch on that really quick, because that's one thing that I don't know that we talked enough about. But our designers have presented a plan here that shows walking as one of the predominant features of this park. And if you look at this plan right here, you can see all of the gray areas are the walking paths, and some of those are permeable spaces, and others, like the central path, might be asphalt or a permeable asphalt, but they're all walkable. And for universal design and making it so that all age groups can use the site, that's one of the key points. And we're lucky to have a pretty flat site here as well, but we have many routes and lots of opportunities to get around the park. The last thing I want to say is going through this process, and then also listening today, and especially the information that I've been able to gain through this, but we've all heard it here tonight, is about the survey information. This park fills a need within the community. or let me rephrase that. This park has the potential to fill multiple needs within the community. And we're really excited because we have heard from people and they've told us through these surveys and through the participation that we've had over the years talking about this, whether it's the dog park or the skills park or universal design and universal access and sports courts. And we heard tonight, and I think everybody realizes this, is there's not enough spaces in our community that are built to house or to accommodate all of the people who would like to use community gardens. So bringing those online is filling a need, and the water conservation and all of the different things that we talked about tonight. This park has the potential to fill multiple needs within the community. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the part where we get to listen to the community members. So the way we did this last time, and I think the way that it works best is, folks, if you could bring up your chat, I will go through the questions. And as you put them in, you're going to be far ahead of me. But if you go ahead and start putting those in, I'm going to read those off in order, try to anyways. And then we're going to try to answer those live. If we can't answer them live, or if we need to put off and do some research to get a good answer for you, we will do that. And we'll try to inform you of how we can get that information to you. Well, let's get started. So let's see. So what are the plans for the existing trees that provide shade to residents that border the East Main Park? Now, of course, in Ashland, we're always mindful of existing trees, and our plan is to keep all of the trees that we can. We have arborists who we work with who let us know whether trees are at the beginning of their life, they're providing useful shade, but also have a lot of life to go, or there's potential also with fast-going trees and riparian trees in some situations, which I think we do have a couple of cottonwoods on this property. We will evaluate those. We don't want to get in a situation where we have dangerous trees out there, but generally speaking, Ashland Parks and Recreation and the city of Ashland in general do everything that we can to preserve trees that are already on site. Okay, so what are the plans to maintain the privacy of the properties that border the East Main Park? And I'll just let Piper explain what the buffer area is, because there is a buffer around the perimeter. I'll just let her explain it though.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so the buffer area, particularly on the east and the west side of the park, is a vegetated buffer, and there are some existing trees, there are some existing shrubs along those, and like Michael said, we will be evaluating those on a tree by tree or shrub by shrub basis. But we see this as being a planted buffer, planted with evergreen shrubs that can provide that buffer between the existing residences and the park itself. Some of them will be tall, some of them will be shorter. Hopefully they provide shade. It's also an opportunity for, again, back to the pollinators. We could find some shrubs that can do both, pollinate and provide some screening and a buffer between the residences and the park.
Right, we didn't put any uses right up against the fence. So if you look at the plan, you can see a kind of a symbolization of a hedge, and there would just be vegetation between any use and the edge of the property. So we have somebody who's concerned about the potential for accidents and asks if there's any data on the occurrence of accidents or injuries in parks with pump tracks versus those without. Concerned about liability issues and the city facing legal actions that may cost taxpayers money. Now, parks and recreation is something that is provided by cities and special districts, and a lot of the reason for that is because some of the things that we're providing are everything that we do. We provide for the benefit of the community. Now, the community has the ability to come out and ride a bike. There's going to be inherent risk in riding a bike on the pump track or using a skateboard on the skate park at the skate park, or hiking in the mountains or mountain biking down hills and things like that. And the way that I would answer this is we will definitely be looking into that and working with our insurance company, making sure that we're following a standard. Now, when we follow standards and we build things to a standard, then we can expect at least a certain level of compliance, hopefully, when people are using it, that where we can have a reasonable expectation that as long as people are using it to the expected or the expected use, or as long as people are using it the way we expect them to and instruct them to, that there should be a reasonable expectation of safety. Now, that means that people have to follow rules and have to wear helmets and have to use the equipment and the facilities as they're intended. But there is inherent liability, or there is inherent danger with all outdoor activities. We try to limit the risk as much as possible by using standards and using professionals like Piper and Aaron and Velo Solutions in designing these things, and engineers, traffic engineers, and all of those that are all following best practices and decided upon standards that we are aware of to help keep our citizens safe. Okay, I'm sure there will be more questions after the meeting. Will there be another venue for public questions and input? Absolutely. We are just for the first time showing you with a preliminary plan here. So we plan on having a few more public meetings. Some of those meetings will be with the Parks Commissioners, where we will be showing the Parks Commissioners these plans. And the public always has the opportunity to come and speak at Parks Commission meetings, whether this is on the agenda or not. If there are concerns or there are questions or there are people want to show support, please feel free to drop us an email. We do have 2 Parks Commission meetings every month. They're the first and second Wednesday of each month. And you can find information on that on our website. Okay, so let me just catch up here a little bit. The daily usage numbers seemed low, just 30 trips per day for parking. How are those estimated? Now, I want to say that might have been peak hour trips.
That's right. Yeah, I misspoke. Sorry. It was peak hour trips. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the peak hour trips is how we plan for traffic, and we are planning based on peak hour. So those numbers that you saw were for peak hour. So we do expect more bike trips than 12 per day, as you saw, and things like that. That was just peak hour. All right. Hi, I live in a mile distance from this. Mainly I have 3 concerns. If this park is constructed as pretty as it seems in the picture, the park could run out of parking spaces mainly on weekdays. Thoughts on that? I'm going to stop there first. Parking is a tricky thing, and we want to provide enough parking for people to use the park, but not so much that we are encouraging people to drive as opposed to using other modes of transportation. Ashland happens to be a walkable and bikeable community, and we do things every year. We try through public works, planning, and parks and others to implement facilities and trails and other facilities on roads and sidewalks and things like that will help people to walk more and bike more. So we don't usually build more parking than what would be required, because we are trying to keep Ashland walkable. That's one of the reasons why we build parks within a quarter-mile distance, so that we can spend our valuable resources in land on amenities that people use as opposed to places for cars to park. The other issue is parking lots are very expensive. And every time you start adding parking spaces, you're talking about $5,000 per parking space, and it goes up and up and up. So I hope that answers your question. We do have parking in other areas. There is parking on the streets. On Abbott, there is some street parking. We have talked about if there was ever an activity that was planned at this location that there could be cross parking if we were able to work with local churches. There is a local church close by and on-street parking. So let me get down to number 2. There's a community of homeless individuals being cared for by a church a block north of this space on East Main Street. Currently, this group of people sometimes use our gardens and front yard to sit down or lay down. My fear is that the park will be used as a safe haven for people just to be there. Do you have any plan to control this kind of problem? Okay, now let me just address that very quickly. All of our parks are safe havens for all people. We don't limit the people or discriminate in any way of the users within our park. Now, we don't build parks so that certain user groups can't use them. We don't build our parks to keep people out. Now, there's always a potential with public spaces that there will be people in the park at different times during the day who are different from other people. And that's just part of the diversity of living in a community. So we have no plans to do anything different in this park to discourage any user groups from using the park. Now, that isn't to say that we would be building this park so that prohibited uses would be allowed, like camping and things like that. There are spaces within the community that are open for camping. This space would be for community use, for recreation and exercise, so on and so forth. So no, we wouldn't be doing anything special to keep any user groups out of this park. Will there be some restrictions on the plants allowed to grow there? Yes, and I think Piper talked about that earlier. That's the next step that they're going to be talking about. Pollinators are a big part of the discussion, and we look forward to getting into the discussion about that. How long will it be before shade trees are big enough to give shade? This is always a concern. I was at Ashland Creek Park on Hersey Street this week, and that park has been there for about 7 years now, and the trees are starting to get bigger, but it takes a long time to build to get a shade canopy like we have in Lithia Park or Glendale Park and those types of parks. We'll do what we can based on budget, but getting the big trees in there does cost a little bit of extra money, but we will do what we can to get the trees growing, use the trees that are already there for shade. But I couldn't give you a time frame. Piper, is there any way to, I don't know that there is a time frame that I could give. Is that a no? Okay. So can you hear me? Okay. All right. Rick Lant, did you have a...
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it's a really interesting thing about trees, because everybody wants a really big tree to begin with. And the problem is that those trees tend to then just kind of sit there and not grow, because it's really difficult for a big tree to get established. So actually, oftentimes, if you start with smaller trees, you can, after 5 to 10 years, they will have outgrown a big tree. So the answer isn't always just to put the biggest tree possible. And I think that's, as we try to save money and be smarter about how we develop this park, I think we need to consider that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lant. Do you have an estimate of when the park might be open? We don't today, but we will be using 2022 for planning. If we can get through the planning portion and we have an annexation to work on, we need to go through and get entitlements from the city of Ashland. We could be looking at construction in 2023. The North Dog Park bike tracks are seldom used. How will the pump tracks be different this time? Well, they are different, and I think there are people who would probably challenge that they're seldom used. I think you have to think about the programming and and the level of, I guess, engineering that went into the bike park over by the wastewater treatment plant versus what we're looking at here. They're two different things. And I do believe, based on the input that we've received, the pump track and the skills park will be used constantly. Let's see. This has gone on too long. Here's the bottom line. The city of Ashland, including the Department of Parks and Recreation, is in a serious budget deficit. There's concerns about this. It's irresponsible, according to this member of the public. If you have a budget, then instead of spending it on more parks, you should contribute it to balancing the budget. You have spent too much already. If the money is earmarked, then you should consider firing 25% of your employees. Maybe that is more palatable than not adding more parks. This is not in the best interest of the city of Ashland. Well, I appreciate your comments. We do have the money to move forward with this park, and it has been a priority for the commissioners for quite a bit of time. And I will just thank you again for your comments. So the emphasis on pollinator and native-friendly plantings, the Xerxes Society has a new guide to meadow lawns and pollinator-friendly community parks. We will make a note of that. Thank you very much. Thank you for such a thoughtful plan. I have concerns about the traffic approaches to the park site. Speed on East Mains are fast. Will there be reduced speed posted as cars approach the park area? Piper, can you comment on that? I don't think there'd be much change to each East Main, but.
Sure. So yeah, East Main is a county road. So it follows under the, the jurisdiction and the of the county, and they set the speed. I think the process with the county for the reduction of the speed is if you build things that, attract people where there's more traffic, then they will reevaluate the speed limit. So versus reducing it now and then building it, if we build it, then there's a higher chance for us to get the speed reduced along East Main. And I see number 2, the Sharrows along Clay Street. I forgot to mention that earlier. Yes, there will be a Sharrow along the entire length of Clay Street to the park, or to Abbott rather.
Clay Street is supposed to be a bike boulevard, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then we'll put one check mark under the tennis court category for the fourth
Thank
court.
you for that.
Okay, so I need to hurry up. We need to get moving. So if you haven't commented already and you've seen the comment that you want to make, if you could refrain in order to get through all the comments. I do believe we have about 40 more that I need to go through. So I'm going to hurry and do this pretty quick. Would the access off of Main Street require a turn lane? These are expensive improvements. They want to know if that's true. We are still working with the county. It doesn't look like right now that it would require a turn lane. There will be improvements required on East Main Street. They will be expensive. We do need to put in a sidewalk. We are planning with this plan that Piper has shown us to try to incorporate that sidewalk more into the park, as opposed to having it adjacent, right on the street, and pull people, just give them a little bit of the park experience along the street there. But yes, there are some expensive street improvements that will be required. We don't have a number on those yet, but we do know that we will be required to make some improvements. East Main is 40. This is again about the speed. Will the ingress and egress be safe without turn lanes? That is a question for our traffic engineers at the city, as well as the county, as well as our traffic engineer that we have hired to consult us and work with them. I can assure you that our safety is a concern of ours as well, and we will be following, like I stated earlier, best practices and adopted standards for the street. What type of surface material will be used in the dog park area, Piper?
Yeah, the plan shows it a little brown, and I think that might be a little bit misleading. The idea would be that we would seed it with, a drought tolerant kind of meadow. meadow seed that we'd be researching, and thanks for the suggestion on the Xeria Society. We'll be definitely looking at that. But yeah, so the dog park would probably be something that's seeded so that it's more green, but open to, some feedback on that from the dog park users.
Okay. Must it be called East Main Street Park? Would you consider naming the park something more interesting? Otherwise, I love everything else about the park. Yes, we would consider naming it something more interesting. And I think there's been some names thrown out there, but that's something that we will continue to talk about. And we will, you can let the commissioners know if you think of something that you think would be a great name for the park. Is a sidewalk being considered? I think we answered that already. How many plots approximately will the community garden accommodate? We are giving a blank slate here. So we are hoping to, with the next phase, work with the community gardeners to talk about how design inside the fence would proceed. But obviously we are looking to take advantage of the space and to provide as many opportunities for people to grow within this community garden as possible, since we still do have that waiting list. Previous paving of parking lot 2. This might have been a second. Okay, yes on solar roof for shelters. What about rain catchment off the roof? That's a good consideration. Considered fire-wise concerns. And I like the open areas for both the large corner and the play area. Is the entire park deer fence? No, it's just the community gardens. Yes to the mason bee shelters, but only if they are taken care of properly. Wait, did you say artificial turf for the play area? And yes, we did. That is not a good thing for children or the environment. Will APRC be able to manage this in addition to all the other parks? Remember, this is a replacement park. We are replacing 6.5 acres of grass fields with a 6.5 acre park that we are working very hard to actually have less maintenance than the previous. Is there a plan to increase staff for maintenance? Again, I think I just answered that. Will we be able to plant big trees? I think we answered that one. What will the surface of the dog park be? I think we answered that one. Lighting, North Mountain Park for playing fields was very controversial with much smaller play areas. Will this park operate without much night lighting and with daylight hours only? At this point in time, we have not discussed night lighting at all, except for safety concerns and those that are required for parking lots and things like that. That has not been a consideration to date. And if that does come up in the future, we will be looking for community input on that. Let's see. I would name the small dog park something different, used by small dogs and dogs who need less crowded or safe areas away from the many dogs. I hear this from time to time, and let's just say we're calling it the small dog park because it's smaller area than the big one. It's just a spatial reference as opposed to the size of the dog. Let's see. I'm wondering about restrictions on dogs outside of the dog park area. For example, would you be allowed to walk your dog from Abbott Avenue to the dog park area? Absolutely. But the only off-leash area would be inside the dog park fence. I assume all lights will be dark sky compliant. Ashland Parks and Recreation has a lighting policy, and I believe we are trying to be dark sky compliant. I can't say exactly that we are compliant with the exact standards that you're speaking to, but if you are interested in our lighting standards, which we try very hard to ensure that no light is going off site and polluting other areas. And we try to use as little light as possible to begin with, but we'd be happy to share that with you if you're interested. Bike lanes on East Main are very narrow and the speed limit is quite high. Will changes be made to make the bike routes to the park safer? As streets improve, bike lanes get bigger, and I'm not 100% sure if we are expanding the asphalt width of the street in this area. But as the county turns this street over to the city, because this is a county street right now, you can count on seeing more improvements going forward. I can't answer that question right now, but you're talking more about, we only have a few hundred feet of frontage on East Main, and we're talking more about a whole East Main problem here. And that's more of an issue for the county and the city as far as traffic planning along the entire street. We definitely will not be fixing all of the problems along East Main with our couple hundred feet of frontage. How will the irrigation rights of the residents on Clay Street be addressed? They will be addressed with your input. I can assure you that. We are aware that there is an irrigation line, and people are using that irrigation line just to the west of this property. We will continue to work with you and provide access and make sure that you are able to take advantage of your irrigation rights. Haven't heard anything about illumination. I think we talked about that. East Main does not have a sidewalk. I think we talked about that. How large is the buffer? The buffer, I don't necessarily know that we have a specific number of feet that the buffer is. We're trying to keep it significant enough that we don't have uses right up against the fence. And I think Piper and Aaron showed a buffer that is looking like it's around 10 feet, actually. But we're not quoting that right now. When we get into engineering and we start looking at this in more detail, I think we'll be able to provide more detail on that. By APRC lighting, this is Commissioner Lant. Lighting cannot directly shine off APRC property. Thank you, Commissioner Lant. Need to add fire reluctant shrubs and trees to the drought tolerance and emphasis on native, especially along the housing. Fences, thick hedges are too risky for transmitting fire along property lines. Thank you for that. We will make a note of that, and that is part of our consideration. Are there plans in place to modify that section of East Main to make turning? I think we answered that a couple of times. I love your design. Thank you. I think that's addressed to Aaron and Piper though. So, and it is the community. Remember, the community got together and put all these uses, and Aaron and Piper were able to make them look and function well. So, especially lack of cement. I want to ask about solar power for electricity. Rain runoff from shade structures into the swells, DG instead of gravel so weeds can be managed. Gravel is impossible to keep weed free. Homeless need shade, bathrooms and picnic tables to gather. Are you thinking of this? Yes, I can see Piper shaking her head. Yes, thank you for your comments. And yes, we are thinking about all of those things. Thank you for your hard work. I'm pleased with this plan. I live on Abbott across from the park, and I'm wondering if there was discussion on cars parking on Abbott. The street is narrow as it is, and cars parking on both sides of the street would create a problem with owners getting out of their garages or even being able to park in front of their homes. Now, of course, we would never encourage people to park where they're not allowed and in front of people's driveways and things like that. Abbott does have some parking that we call it bulb outs that are at the intersections that kind of outline the parking and provide a parking lane. Again, I'm just going to go back to our goal is to create parks that are walkable and bikeable. It's not our goal to encourage people to drive. We think that the Abbott access is more for the neighborhoods and the vehicular access is more off of East Main. We have to acknowledge that we do have two uses here that will likely bring people from all over town with the bike park and the dog park. But as we've talked about in the past, we tried to split this up so that the East Main side would be focused on those uses that might be more car dependent, and of course not completely car dependent, but might be more car dependent. And the other side, the Abbott side, would be more focused on the community use and the walkability, being able to walk to it and easy access for the community to get in and out. And you'll also notice that there's no connection between Abbott and East Main Street, because we did want to make that distinction so that we do still have a community park, but also with some more citywide uses on the east side. Are we expecting to have a full-time on-site attendant? No, we don't and wouldn't in a situation like this. We would have maintenance staff on site. There would be rules to use, just like at the dog park that exists and the skate park and other facilities. There would be rules for use that if people followed. You could have a reasonable expectation of safety, as I explained before. What prompted the addition of the sports court? There was no discussion previously of this, and it was not a priority from the survey. Well, it's one of those things where we are always looking at parks and what is typical within a park, and a multi-sport court surface is typical within a park. So we're asking the residents to give us feedback on that. We're asking the citizens, we're asking the users to give us feedback on that. And we're still working on that, trying to get that feedback and decide what that would look like. Will there be additional input from dog owners? We would love to hear from the dog owners. If there is a dog owner association, please let us know what that is so that we can make contact with you. Otherwise, potentially we could have just a schedule meeting for dog owners in general. Lighting should be shielded. We totally agree. And lighting will be addressed on site. How many acres is the dog park area? Can we, do you have that, Piper?
Let me look. Wait, continue.
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
I'll come up with
I'm
it.
gonna go on. And will there be safety cameras in the park? It's not a typical use to put cameras in the park. That is something that has been considered at other parks. It has not been brought up for this park. And so at this point in time, there actually is no plan for cameras in the park. As a 30-year resident of Ashland, the last 11 in this neighborhood, I've been among the many residents waiting over a decade for this high-density population area to have an easier accessible green space and shade is proven to greatly enhance mental, physical health. With COVID isolation heightening the need, I've watched many neighbors, kids grow up, graduate from high school, and move on while waiting for such a park, even as now 60 more units have been added, each with several more young children in each household, and also dogs, large and small. Let's get moving. I agree. Let's get this going. Thank you for your comments. It would be nice if there was an easier connection from the current bike path to Clay Street and for this park, so that folks would easily bike there. The current access from the bike path to Clay Street isn't great. You have to cross the railroad tracks, I believe. We agree with you, and that is something that we are talking about. We don't think we have the solution with this park, I can tell you right now. But we are working with the city, just generally speaking, to try to improve situations like that. And that one has come up multiple times. And if there is anything we can do with this park, we would. But as you saw, the funds are limited, and we would generally be focused on on-site improvements as opposed to off-site improvements. But I do want to say we are, like we said, we are talking about universal design and active transportation, and all of us are constantly working to improve active transportation within the entire community. And I will take those concerns to Public Works and continue to talk to my peers about possibilities on that for that situation. Piper?
It's approximately for both the small and the dog park area, it's approximately 3/4 of an acre.
Okay, thank you. The pace of phasing in the completed park worries me, as does poor biking access without safer marked lanes on East Main and Clay Street, both highly trafficked streets. Thank you for your comment. There is growing interest in pickleball in Ashland. Will it be added to the multi-use court? Is that a check mark for pickleball? I think that is at least an inquiry. So we have at least a mention of tennis and pickleball, and also a mention of why sport court at all. So
Right. Mhm.
is parking for the community garden adequate for pickup and drop off materials? You know what? We think it is actually. We do think it is. Based on our experience with Ashland Creek Park, we think that this is completely adequate. Congratulations on so much community participation so far. The plan fits in a wide range of activities for one park. My only concern is whether each area has enough room for optimum use. I assume Piper and Aaron have heard from experts about the size of each area. Do you have any concerns about size? Now, I would say Piper and Aaron, for the most part, are our experts. The dog area and the bike area are two areas where I think we are getting outside input on whether the areas are are the right size. Piper, do you want to say anything else on that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned when we started laying the, each of these programmed elements out, we worked with Velo Solutions, our bike design consultant, and worked with them on an approximate size for the pump track and the skills course, based on some of the other bike parks that they have built. And according to them, that size seemed adequate. So, again, this is a space holder, and we'll get into the design, so it might change a little bit, grow or shrink, but it's approximately the correct size. And the same thing with the dog park and the community garden. They're all sized, based on input from the community gardens and staff, and the same thing with the dog park, some of the dog owners and staff as well.
Thank you. So I think we're getting close here. How does one sign up to participate in one of the advisory groups for particular aspects of the park, the sports court, community garden, dog park, etc.? I think if you can send us your information through our parks info line, and you can get that Tara, can you actually give me that email address? I think it's just parksinfo@ashland.or.us. Then we can add you to the interest group list, and we will notify you of when meetings are happening and things like that. And you can decide if you'd like to participate in upcoming meetings. Very exciting to see the plans, and things are starting to seem real. So I totally agree. Very excited to be here as well. Not a question, just wanted to say that I'm happy to see progress on this park and to see so many desirable amenities being included. Keep up the good work. You know what? I think we will. Thank you. I'm so happy this park is the final piece of the puzzle that completes our park system. Many people and neighbors especially have been working long and hard on this project, and I look forward to the grand opening. Ashland can't afford not to keep its parks. Thank you. Agreed. Audio is not working. I hope you got that fixed. Let's see. I believe the pump track will be used very often. The reason the Northern BMX Bike Park does not get much use is that it is not well built and maintained or in an easily accessible location. Thanks for that input and clarification. Why does the dog park seem like a given when it was so far down the list? For what the community wants in the survey? No offense to dog or dog owners. Well, we wouldn't want to offend dogs. So, the impetus for having a plan, moving forward on a plan for a park in this area, a lot of it was behind a second dog park from the beginning. Some of these other uses came a little bit later, like the pump track and the skills park. But the dog park is one of the reasons why we've been looking at a park. The dog park is something we've been trying to add to this area of town for quite a long time. So it has been a need that's been identified in the community for a long period of time. And you might see that reflected in the survey because people have been hearing about it for such a long time. that it maybe even the dog owners think it's a given. So will you be considering using community volunteers to help build the park system? Absolutely. Similar to what was done in the playground structure, Bear Creek Park in Medford, this may help reduce the cost. Absolutely. And I think there's going to be more opportunities in a park like this than there would be in, say, a park where we were putting in multiple soccer fields and things like that. So definitely, especially on the skills park side. And the pump track is a little bit different because that's more structural, but yeah, there will be opportunities. We are excited about this plan. Thank you. The CTHOA, the HOA area on Abbott have major parking issues. I think we heard this from another as well with just the current neighbors. My hope is this will not impact our current parking difficulties. Can you break down percentage of land use for each feature listed? We will work on that for another presentation. Pump track does not seem to be eco-friendly at all. How big is community garden? It seems way small. We'll work on breaking that down for you. We'd be happy to give you that information. This is definitely not the smallest garden that Ashland Parks and Recreation has in town. Sport court looks like a design afterthought. Doesn't seem to fit with otherwise thoughtful design of the rest of the park. Could it be redesigned as a circle and function the same as a noise generator? Good to place as central as possible away from the surrounding residents. Thank you for the feedback. Sometimes there are 35 to 40 dogs at one time at the only Ashland dog park on the weekend. The dog park, I think, is 2 acres. The dog park at East Main seems too small. The dog park being small makes dogs get too cozy, or crazy, sorry, not cozy, and not able to run around much. Thank you for that feedback. That's something we do need to talk about, and sizes and things like that going forward. And we appreciate all of the feedback on the sizes of the facilities.
Yeah.
Half circle, thank you. Parks info at ashland.or.us if you want to be added to any of these lists. There are other models for community gardens that can serve a large population of the community, mainly children, i.e. a community food share garden is one I recommend. Now, you'll notice on this community garden that it is kind of a blank slate. It's just an area right now. We want to work with the community and the community garden organizers, some of those who work for Ashland, but also volunteers, to come up with a plan that's going to work best for the community. CTHOA is Chautauqua Trace HOA. Thank you. And will the park add organized programs offered for kids as they have done at Garfield Park past years? Most of our parks are used by different groups. Not every organized activity that you see in our parks is actually organized by Ashland Parks and Recreation. A lot of them are, but I can assure you that we are trying to build a park that will be attractive for many, many uses, and we will organize programs, and I believe there will probably be other groups that organize programs within the community that you will probably see having day camps. The YMCA sometimes uses Garfield Park for day camps, and we have other users within all of our parks who take advantage of that, and we love that our parks are well used. So we take that as an example or a confirmation that we're designing good parks and maintaining those in a way that is attractive for people and useful for people. So yes, we will hopefully have that use going forward as well. Now, I'm sorry for talking so fast and rushing through these. We are at the end of this. Thank you for those who stuck around. I think we lost about 30% of the people over the last 20 minutes, but we still have a lot of people who participated in this process and heard a lot of great comments. We are recording this. We are keeping track of all of your comments. And even though we went through them kind of quick, that was more so that I wanted to touch on everybody's comments because every one of them is important. But we will go back over the comments as we move forward and spend a little bit more time as a design team working on these. Piper, I want to give you a chance to say anything else at the end here.
Well, thank you all for the input and for the opportunity to design this park. And we're really looking forward to the next steps. We're working with, whoever wants to jump on and help out refine the park. And thank you for the feedback. I think hearing some of the feedback, particularly about the sizes of things, will be truly the next flush of the design. So that was great. Very informative. Thank you.
Okay, so our next steps, as we talked about, would be to start refining the plan. We are going to the Parks Commission. I believe we are doing that in April, but we'd ask you to just keep an eye on the agendas for the Parks Commission. If you don't already keep an eye on those agendas, there's a lot of other information out there as well on other programs that we're working on and things that we have going on for the community. Always informative, I think, to see what the parks commissioners are up to. We will send notices out to people who have signed up to be on the lists and have shown interest in the past, and try to keep you informed of upcoming meetings. We, as Piper stated earlier, this is a preliminary plan. We do have future steps that we need to go through, but we appreciate all of the feedback that was given tonight. We think we got a lot of really good feedback, very important that we were able to get so many people involved. And that's one of the things that we've been fortunate with this Zoom and webinar process, is that we are able to capture people and get their feedback that other times we haven't been able to see show up to meetings. And so I think it's provided accessibility that wasn't quite there previously. There's just a couple more comments, just really quick. Sidewalk from Walker to Tolman Creek on East Main. I'll look into that. We'll look into that. And just some thank yous for the presentation, and then the community garden area. We'll provide some information on that going forward. So I am going to close this meeting, unless there's any other comments from Piper or any of our commissioners. Thank you all.
Don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming to the meeting. We look forward to your participation in the future, and we look forward to a continuing exciting process, getting this park designed and hopefully built and implemented for the citizens of Ashland. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.